the Sustainability Management Master's Program, you're answering one simple question. Do you care about your future generation? If you care about your kids, their grandkids, then you care about sustainability. And a sustainability manager is someone who has the tools to make people understand how they can contribute towards developing a sustainable world. We have both part-time and full-time students. Our curriculum is 30 hours. Instead of thesis, we have a research project course and a seminar course which provides them with the kind of research background they will need to be successful in their job. But at the same time, sustainability is not always everything about environment. It also relates to the business. They will take a sustainable business strategies course. They will take a project management course. Most of these courses are going to be taught by industry people, the people who are doing sustainability on a daily basis as a part of their job. Any organization that has a large number of employees and has a physical infrastructure, they will have to have a sustainability office. If you have the passion to develop and maintain a sustainable world, come to us and we will help you shape your passion into a career which will create an impact.
All right. Thanks, Dibs, and thanks, Parisa, for having me, inviting me tonight. Get this going. There we go. All right. So tonight's discussion is the use of Envision Sustainability Rating System on transportation projects. I've been using the Envision rating system since 2012. I'm one of the at Dewberry, we sent several people to earn the ENVSP once it was established by ISI years ago. So Dewberry is a charter member of ISI, and so I'm one of the longest standing ENVSPs here at Dewberry. So why are we talking about Envision? We want to show how Envision's used on transportation projects, but to get to that, I got to talk a little bit about what Envision is. Some of you might know a bit about it, but we'll go over the Envision basics. We'll talk about some of the challenges associated with the transportation project, and then a little bit of how Envision has been used maybe across the board and on some of the other sectors, and just how it's grown over the years. So again, I'm your speaker tonight. There's my contact information. You'll see that again at the end if you need it. But I figured, and if want to do show of hands here, if anybody wants to chime in, I just kind of wanted to feel for the group. How many people have actually heard of Envision and know
use
what
your
it is?
electronic hand, guys. Like, just use your electronic hand.
Yeah, that's it. That's good enough. Yeah. So there's some interest here. Some people have obviously seen it or heard of it. Doesn't look like it's everybody, so that's fine. How many of you have actually used the Envision rating system, though? It's one thing to have heard of it. How many have actually used it? Do we get any thumbs up for that? Probably not, right? Or even used it in, a student way and exploring with it, Okay, that's fine. You're going to learn a little bit more about it tonight. So, first of all, what's sustainable infrastructure? The whole concept of sustainability really, in my mind, grows out of NEPA, the National Environmental Policy Act, which dates back to the late 1960s. And that was established to create and maintain conditions under which man and nature can exist in productive harmony and fulfill social, economic, and other requirements to present of present and future generations of Americans. What I want to point out here is that way back in 1969, when they're passing the Environmental Policy Act, they recognized that the social aspects were important as well as the economics. And when you think about sustainability, you think about those three pillars: environmental, social, and economic, and how they kind of come together and are balanced. And that's how you can tell if something is sustainable. So infrastructure projects, you're not just because they are serving the public in a larger manner, aren't just serving the needs of the specific project. It's not just a site. It's something much larger. So it's good serving the community. So what type of issues do we see in transportation projects? That are just general issues that perhaps relate to sustainability. You've got the fact that we're dealing with aging infrastructure. So sustainability means we want to see something that's going to go forward for the future. Public safety. We want safe projects. Climate change and resiliency. We want resilient projects that are going to design for the future water levels and climate temperature issues, rising temperatures. We want to make sure that our projects are able to resist that and rebound from it. Acceptable to the community. Accessibility. Is it infrastructure project able to be used by everyone? How does it stand up to emergencies? The fact that we use or recycle materials within the construction is something that is a sustainable aspect, of course, right? We're always looking at the multiple regulations that affect a project. Again, looking forward to what's going to be going in the future. Energy, what are the energy needs? We don't want to be using more and more energy. We have to be very energy conscious. And then, of course, social justice and equity. Is it serving the community and the population? Envision takes all these things into account. I mean, just like NEPA really does take most of these issues into account as well, Envision does too. So looking at the life of infrastructure, highways, we say 20 to 50 years. Bridges, 35 to 70. I mean, that's what it was. Now bridges are designed for 75 to 100-year life, or even 150 they're looking at. Pipelines, you've got to be looking that far into the future. Same with dams. You've got to, everything needs to, of course, have an inspection cycle along with it, but you've got to plan things for the future so that they are viable for the future and can continue to serve the public. So when you're planning a project out, the early phases, the planning phase, that's when you have the ability to incorporate sustainable thoughts into your project and to think about sustainability and make sure that you're thinking of all these issues that just listed on the prior slide. Think about those to make sure that you're incorporating that into the project's design. It's much easier to incorporate things in the planning stage and then incorporate them into the design than to realize way over here on the construction side, oh, what about emergency preparedness? Why didn't we think of that earlier? Well, it's going to take you a lot longer to deal with that change in construction. So the earlier we think about sustainability, the better. So that's just some thoughts on why we want to have sustainable projects. So that brings me to what Envision is. In the past, or prior to the establishment of Envision, there were a few different sustainability systems, actually several different sustainability systems under development. Inroads was one, Green Lights is another that's still used by New York DOT. Invest was another one. And, they all had their advantages, but they were very sector specific. So they didn't encompass all of infrastructure. LEED has been a well-established sustainability rating system for buildings for better part of 30 years at this point, and it's well recognized, but it focuses on the vertical building construction, not on infrastructure, which can cover long areas and actually be, an infrastructure project and go for miles and miles. LEED wasn't really going to account for that. So the Envision rating system was conceived to be able to cover all the different types of infrastructure projects there could be. So Envision became this blueprint for infrastructure projects. Enables thorough examination of sustainability and resiliency of infrastructure projects, gives practical guidance on how to improve performance, and drives better project management. You'll see when I'm getting into the details about it, how all these aspects of Envision were incorporated. So the Institute for Sustainable Infrastructure is who runs the Envision product. They are the organization that provides for Envision and oversees it. So ISI was established, it's an education research nonprofit, but it was a collaboration between ACEC, which is the American Council of Engineering Consultants, APWA, the American Public Works Association, and ASCE, the American Society of Civil Engineers. They were all dabbling in sustainability. They came together to form ISI. They then collaborated with the Zofnass program at Harvard, who was developing this sustainability rating system, and they took it on and were then able to basically market and administer the product for the infrastructure industry to everyone in the civil engineering community. So the Envision version 1 of Envision was released in 2012. I believe version 2 came out in about 2018. Version 2 came out quickly. Version 3 came out around that time, the late teens. And they're actually working on a version 4 at this point. So what is this Envision tool? What is it? What's the point of it? Well, it establishes some standards for infrastructure projects. It incentivizes performance so that you can look for levels of achievement that you can achieve and get recognition for your project. It provides an organized structure for evaluating sustainability on projects. It encourages collaboration between multiple team members. Any infrastructure project is crossing multiple disciplines, and you need to kind of pull those people together and really collaborate to make sure that the sustainability permeates throughout all the disciplines. Draws public attention and recognition. It means something. If you see LEED on a building or you see Envision on an infrastructure project, it means something. The public knows that this project went through scrutiny to achieve that award. It's good governance. It just helps to demonstrate the right way to do things. And it recognizes commitment by signing on to some sustainability principles early on in the game. You can make sure that you do have a sustainable project, and that really will help it continue and last longer. So, I've been talking about infrastructure here. And this is, a smattering of all the different types of infrastructure, and you can see how different they are, and just the idea of one rating system that can address all these types of infrastructure projects is pretty impressive. I mean, you've got energy, all the different types of energy production that you have, not to mention the distribution network. You've got water, both from a stormwater management standpoint and a water supply aspect, and as well as flooding. All these types of projects can use the Envision rating system. Waste, solid or liquid hazardous, collection all kind of comes into there. Transportation. That's what I'm going to talk about tonight. But even within transportation, from airports to ports and waterways to highways, bikeways, transit, there's a lot in there. Landscape. It's an important part of the infrastructure that really complements the built environment, the buildings that surround us, but to have green space in between them, and a place for people to congregate is important. And then information, the telecom industry, data centers, and so forth, all pretty important infrastructure facilities that we need to be able to really make sure that they're lasting for the future. So, all right, so now we're really going to get into what Envision really is and the components of it. So it starts out with project verification levels. Four levels, and these percentages are, what do those mean? Well, the Envision framework is a collection of 64 credits amongst all these credit categories that I've got listed here now, and I'll get into those in a minute. And there's 1,000 points associated with these credit categories. So if you can achieve 20% or 200 points, it's an Envision verified project. If you can achieve 50% or 500 points, that's platinum. And there's a lot of nuances to how the points are attributed, but it's just kind of giving what those award levels mean. And you might think that verified, gee, 20%, that's not very much. Well, when you get into the nitty-gritty of this and you're looking at all these credits, they don't all apply to every project. So just the fact that you can get to verified in many projects is a real achievement. So talking about the credit categories, it's broken down into 5 major areas. So we've got quality of life. This is the social aspects of projects and the human side, and making sure that it is a good project for the people. All right. Leadership. The leadership division is how the project is managed and how it is run. Resource allocation. What materials are used in the project? What are the resources that you're using? The natural world is the traditional environmental concerns of preserving as much of the natural environment as we can. And then climate and resilience, taking into account risks and climate change and emissions. So these are there's 64 credits among these 5 categories, and I'll get into the specifics of all of those. But you need to think about all these credits during the life cycle of the project. In the planning phase, you want to think about all of these aspects. Now, maybe these quality of life ones come or traditionally would happen more in the planning phase. But really, you need to look at all of these as well, and not just pick them up during the design phase. Obviously, the planning is to lay out the project, make sure you're doing the right project. Designing it is then, are you designing the project correctly? And then construction, you execute that design and make sure you have built the project in accordance with the design. And then finally, the operational phase is, you've constructed your project, but now let's operate it and maintain it for the next 100 years or more. So I'm going to get into the 5 credit categories now, and just kind of show you what the points are, or I'm sorry, what the credits are within each one. So you can see here, quality of life. This is okay. There's 5 credit categories, and this happens to have 200 points. So that sounds right. It's 1/5. It's not going to be the case actually. The points are kind of get distributed among the other categories a little bit differently. But in any event, um, we have five levels of achievement within each credit. You'll see here some dashes. Sometimes a particular level of achievement is skipped and there's not parameters set forth for it. But obviously, increasing points as you move from right to left, if you can achieve more with a particular credit, you get a higher points. So moving as you advance from improved to enhanced, superior, conserving, and restorative is the highest point category for any of the credits. Now then, looking down the what the credits are here, we're looking at well-being, quality of life, health and safety, noise, vibration, light, construction impacts. These all have effects on the human environment and the people in the area of a project. Mobility, this has to do with making sure that, mobility is built into a project. These are pretty important in transportation projects, obviously, but sustainable transportation, mobility, and access and wayfinding, so that people can actually find their way through the system. And then, of course, community, more of the things that affect the community as a whole and bring them together. So you've got equity and social justice, historic and cultural resources, views and local character, and then, of course, public spaces. So those are your quality of life credits. Here we have the leadership credits. All right, so this one's a little bit less. There's only 182 points here with this one. But these credits talk about effective leadership, collaboration and commitment, fostering collaboration and teamwork, stakeholder involvement, pursuing byproduct synergies. This is looking at different byproducts or types of construction that can serve two different purposes. So that's kind of a cool thing to look at. A sustainability management plan, sustainable communities, monitoring and maintenance, end of life. I'm going to actually talk about this end of life as a challenge later on. But, we don't think of transportation projects as having an end of life. The end of life of a bridge is that you put up a new bridge. But in other sectors, like the energy sector, power plants are only built knowing they've got a certain lifespan, and you have to kind of plan for that. So that's an important thing that we don't always think about in the planning of projects is what happens when this has come to the end of its useful life. Here's our economic portion here. Looking for, economic prosperity, looking for local skills and capabilities, looking to use that local labor force, and life cycle economic evaluation for, life cycle analysis of the products that are part of a project. Resource allocation, 196 points here. These are the materials and the resources that go into your product. So you're looking at the types of materials, and here's where you're going to capture your waste and recycling, reuse opportunities here. And also the establishment of sustainable procurement practices. Energy, always looking to reduce energy consumption. But there's also the aspect of renewable energy and commissioning energy systems, which is making sure that they're operating efficiently. And then, of course, water, preserve and reduce the use of water and monitor those water systems. All right, so here we've got the natural world, which is your ecological footprint reductions. And here you'll see a few more points. This tips to the other way. There's 232 points available here. Siting. Are you picking the right site? Is it the right project location? Conservation. protecting the site. Are you citing something on a brownfield site? You're managing your stormwater properly. And then ecology, where you're looking to maintain ecological habitats and preserve wetlands, control invasive species, and so forth. So this is the ecological portion of the rating system. And then the last category is climate resilience, 190 points here. One part of that is dealing with emissions. So we've got credits for embodied carbon, reduction of greenhouse gases and other air pollutants. And then resilience, we're looking at vulnerabilities, resilience, ways to maintain resilience goals, and then finally improving infrastructure integration, which this is talking about how multiple systems, that it be data systems, energy systems, are integrated and can work together efficiently. So I know this is a little small to see, but each of the credits has a 2-page guidance. And we're going to go through each of these sections on the forthcoming slides where you can see them a little bit better. But it's just, it ends up with a series of questions that you have to answer regarding the particular credit, and then it helps you understand how to score that aspect of a project. So let's look at this one here. What does it start with? We have the purpose or the intent of the credit. Why are you evaluating this credit? And then there's a metric and how you're going to measure this credit. How are you going to measure it? How are you going to score the points? Then we look at the levels of achievement, and you have particular questions that are posed to demonstrate how to advance a project through the different levels of achievement to get maximum points. You're not going to always get the maximum points on every credit. Absolutely not. You're maybe going to get it on, I don't know, 1 out of 5, 1 out of 8 of your credits. But they build on each other. You will see, in order to get to restorative, you need all of the prior ones before it. You build on it in that manner. So working through this Envision process, going through each of the credits, answering the questions, you are able to understand how your project stacks up to each one of these credits. So you want to establish a team that is knowledgeable about all these areas. Meet with that team and conduct what we start out with in the Envision process is a pre-assessment. It's a much shorter list of questions, and you go through each of the credits in a very quick manner, maybe 2 or 3 questions, and you can get a feel for what level of achievement you can achieve. You then use the very detailed 2-page questionnaire to be able to back up that pre-assessment. And when I say back up, it's collect the documentation that proves that you have met that level of achievement. So there's a lot of things that can, go wrong when you're going through this process. But Envision really helps you to establish a better project. And these are some of the solutions that come from the Envision process. So if you don't have a great project organization Envision will help you do that because you need to provide documentation for each credit. Oops, sorry. Easy access to organized files. So that can happen when you do not, everyone's not communicating together on the same level. So this Envision system helps you organize your files. A consistent language or a consistent sustainability rating system here helps you use consistent terminology. Let's see. Credit intent and available documentation. This helps you focus on what is needed to achieve a particular credit. So it helps you really focus on different areas. And then finally, your due diligence contracting, it kind of helps to keep the project moving because you're constantly collaborating with all your partners on the project to collect the data that's needed for the Envision system. So here's just some of the overall benefits from the Envision system. Increased resiliency, lower operating costs, reduction of negative impacts. It's the credibility of a third-party rating system. When someone else looks at your project and puts the stamp of approval on it, that goes a long way. It is flexible. There's also credits that I didn't mention are available for innovation with each of the 5 major categories. Better project management, and it allows for better growth. Within organizations, if you use it, it's kind of some of the same things. You can have savings associated with it. Again, the credibility of the third party rating. And that third party rating really helps to boost the public confidence in your project. Common understanding, and it's a good means to educate staff and teams and come to a common mindset on how to think about projects. So what are the challenges that we've seen with transportation projects that have gone through Envision? So here, the Times Square shuttle project was the first Envision verified project for the MTA. The Times Square shuttle runs between Times Square and Grand Central and is a short subway segment. It's not actually a subway line, but it's a shuttle, but it is a subway. It took a fair amount of time to get through the Envision process with it because it was the first project they pursued and didn't realize the intensity of some of the documentation. And they didn't start with it all the way from the beginning of the planning project. They were due at the planning level, they would have had documentation available all along the way. But when first doing the pre-assessment, when we were working on this, we thought the project was eligible for the Platinum Award, and which would have been 50% of all the available points. We ended up with just the Envision Verified, which is the 20% level. But the challenge there was collecting some of the documentation. They did the right thing in the project, but they didn't have the right type of documentation at their fingertips to be able to achieve a higher level. So that was the limitation there. Better record keeping and documentation would help in the future, and they've learned that and they know it. So this here is some of the credits that are a lot of credits. You can see it's most of the credits along the of a project. This is a typical transportation project that we've worked on. You can see we go after most of the credits, but you don't have to go for every one. Every project doesn't have brownfield, so that's might not be something you pursue. Every project doesn't have prime farmland, so there's nothing to do there. But And the point is that the transportation projects are large and they can really go after as many credits as are applicable. You go through the pre-assessment, you establish which ones you're going to go for, and then you collect the documentation on those. So I'm going to go through some of the credits that are particularly challenging for transportation projects. So improving construction safety. You would think on the surface that this is a very simple, basic credit that, any contractor should want to and be able to achieve. Well, when you're doing the Envision rating of a project, you typically submit it to Envision at the end of the design process before a contractor's on board. And then the second step to an Envision project is they do verify that the construction occurred as it was designed. So there is a second submission of construction documentation that shows that the project met the design intent. Well, when you say you're going to improve construction safety in the design phase, and then you retain a contractor, and the contractor feels they have their own confidential documentation, it might be hard to collect some of the documentation to get the higher point rating on this. And that can be one that was a bit of a challenge we've faced with the contractors on the projects. The plan for the end of life. As I mentioned earlier, oh, I see we have a question. We're taking questions now.
Am I
Yes.
able to ask a question
Yeah,
now?
you can.
Yeah, it's
Okay.
fine with me. I don't mind.
Okay, can we go back to the slide you had before?
Sure.
Okay. So, I'm a sustainability consultant and I deal a lot with sustainability programs. I have not dealt with this one because I do not do projects like with transportation and everything, but this is an interesting one. And I do have a question. So commitments to safety would mean that they have to do plans, correct?
Yeah.
Okay, and then the next one over, which is risk analysis and training and security. So I get the training where they have to put in training modules, for their people. But now risk analysis, that would mean that they would have to do an analysis of what possible risks are at the job site and what they would be doing to counter these risks.
Yeah, and that's a pretty basic component of a health and safety program.
Right. And the training and then the security of it, right?
Yep.
And then we move over to the superior, which is safe work practices and secure site. That too is normally within these, plans that the GCs have, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So do you find that projects have a hard time accomplishing all the way up to superior on your projects?
We do, and the reason I have highlighted this one is because of lessons learned. Internally, a contractor may do a lessons learned and analyze near misses and so forth, but they don't want to share that with their client per se, the project owner, or provide the documentation of that for the Envision submission. Because you're looking back at their history and they're not so comfortable sharing that information. Or the other thing is that even though they say they will account for lessons learned, they don't have a documented process for it.
Oh, okay. So this
And
plan.
that's the challenge on these, because
Okay.
this is an example of one where you would think they'd be able to get, up to these higher levels, but this lessons learned has been a stumbling block we found.
The one that's a problem.
Yeah. And contractors are coming around. They're getting better at this and they're documenting the process. So in the future, I'm hopeful that, the contractors will be able to provide a documented process for communicating lessons learned.
Okay.
All right.
Do you have anything of an example of that? Because I work with some GCs that I think sometimes they dabble in, I know they work in government projects. I don't think they do transportation or anything like that. I don't believe they've done this sustainability certification. But if I can give them this information and allow them to at least have this info, they might be willing to start making notes and collecting any kind of documentation for them if it ever comes up
Sure.
for them, because they're always
Sure.
asking me, Maggie, what's out there, right? So
Yeah.
this is something that's out there, right?
Oh, yeah.
So yeah,
So,
okay.
are you an ENVSP?
I'm sorry.
Do you have the ENVSP certification from
No,
ISI? Okay,
no, I don't. But
you can visit the ISI website and you can get much more information about what I'm explaining here and the Envision rating system, and you can drill down on this credit and you can get uh, more information about it, but just by going to
Yes, and as
ISI's.
I mentioned that we have an ISA chapter here at Stevens, and
Okay.
there are some free membership
Mm-hmm.
offers. Connect Maggie to Leslie Brunel, who actually runs it, and then
that
she'll
would
be
be
able to get a
great.
membership. Yep,
Okay,
and
yes,
let's
yes.
let's do that, and let's move into the next section because Jim has to finish his presentation.
Yes. I apologize.
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah,
yes.
yeah.
I was
We
just
got a
looking.
lot to go through yet, but
Yes. All
we'll
right.
have
Yeah.
time for Q&A. Don't worry, don't worry.
Okay.
Okay. So I talked about the end of life. Not something that you typically think about on a transportation project. Like I said earlier, you just think, you know, so many of the projects are like, well, they're going to last forever, aren't they? You know, like we build them forever. It's like, well, it's not really the case. You know, pavement has a life, bridges have a life, you know, so maybe it is part of the maintenance of your project, but you've got to really plan for that. And as part of that maintenance, there is end of life incorporated there. On other infrastructure projects, end of life is a real thing. You know, the technology is only good for so long, so you know you're going to have to replace it. But even that, you know, what is the replacement thought? How long is that going to be, and what is it going to be at that point? So, um, so that's just kind of the challenge here with the end of life is just planning for that because transportation projects don't do that. So, trying to get them to plan for that and incorporate it into their project is a challenge. Operational energy consumption. So not during construction, but during the operation phase of a project, we're looking for energy reductions. So it's one thing to say it's going to use less energy, but how do you prove that? Like, how do you know how much the energy is going to be reduced or what is it being reduced from? So you actually have to run a baseline energy calculation to begin with and to be able to do that comparison to demonstrate your reduction percentage. So that can be challenging on some of the projects because just doing that baseline energy calculation is like, well, what are we basing it on? You know, the way the project was designed, it was designed to be energy efficient. So you have to basically do assume an older technology and do a calculation for that. Managing stormwater. What we have found, and I've worked in several states with Envision projects, and we've had this challenge with every one of them. Managing stormwater is one of the most regulated aspects of an infrastructure project, and you would think that and stormwater design is so important to infrastructure projects that you would think everyone's got a grasp on it, and everybody does, and they do the right thing. However, the regulatory environment in the eastern states is different than what Envision is looking for here. So they're looking for a different methodology. So all the stormwater calculations that are done just to meet the regulatory requirements, they've got to be redone for the purposes of an Envision submission. And that's a challenge, and I believe that's something that they are really looking into to be able to be more flexible in that regard. Reducing net embodied carbon. Net embodied carbon is often fairly readily accessible for materials. However, the transportation component of getting the material to the site is something that you do have to calculate and you have to add on. And it can be a little bit challenging or a little extra bit of calculation that has to be done. So, and then another one within climate risk, evaluate risk and resilience. This seems like it would be easily to achieve, that you do a risk assessment, but the risk assessment that Envision is looking for is pretty prescriptive. And there's a lot of points associated with this credit. So in the planning phase, when you know you're going to do a risk assessment, look at what Envision is looking at for risk assessment and make sure you do it in that regard, because then you can get a lot of points here for a good risk assessment. The other thing with this risk assessment, it's a prerequisite for the 2 credits that come after this. So you might as well do the risk assessment right, and you can garner a lot of points here. And what we found is that the projects have already advanced too far, and the risk assessment was not comprehensive enough to really get the points that they really could probably have gotten to. So that's some of the challenges that I've felt with the transportation projects. And now I'm going to just go through, and if I'm running too long and you want to jump onto questions, we can do that at any time after this. But just to kind of give you a flavor of where Envision's been used around the country, you can see, not surprisingly, the darker states are the ones where the more projects have been. So California, New York, Florida, Virginia kind of makes sense. The largest states, they've had more projects. Virginia making sense since ISI is headquartered in DC. It was established as a North American standard, but it has gone worldwide. So you can see that, of course, the US and Canada are the tops here, but Italy and Saudi Arabia have used the system quite a bit. And these are numbers of Envision projects through the end of 2025. So this is just showing you how many projects have gone through the process since 2012. Breakdown by infrastructure sector, half the projects are transportation. 30% are water, and then the rest of the sectors are much, much smaller, but it's transportation and water have really been the 2 major sectors that have utilized the Envision process. How many registrations per year? You can see it's been increasing pretty steadily. 2025 was their highest year. You'll note here the dip from 2018 to 2019. That's when they went from version 2 to version 3. So they rushed a bunch through under the old system before the new one came out. Kind of similar trend here as was with the registrations, but these are the Envision awards granted. So even though there have been, the steadily increasing over the years, a lot more projects have actually been just registered, which is the starting of the process with Envision, as opposed to actually obtaining the Envision award and having the verification completed. And where are the professionals that can rate projects? California, New York, Texas, and Florida, and Virginia, again, are the one where most of those people reside that have this certification. Not surprising. And then internationally, of course, the US is the highest, followed by Canada and Italy. But there is an international presence of people that do have the ENVSP. So some of the best practices here, I can't emphasize the early integration and utilizing it in the um, design process, the multidisciplinary teams, bringing the various people together from multiple disciplines to understand the project and the sustainable components, the communication between all the team members, and the standardized method of rating the project. Costs. Most of the people that have used Envision have indicated that maybe there was a slight cost increase, but not much. But they report that it added value. That extra cost was worth it in the end. So, yeah, so just some kind of good feedback. Did implementing Envision add value to the project? 84% agreed that it did. So it's a good tool. To
Jim,
what
we have 5
degree?
more minutes.
Go ahead, Dibs.
Jim, 5 more minutes.
5 minutes? Okay, we'll be through this. I'm just going through some of these type questions.
Absolutely.
Fair enough. Did we added value outweigh any of the additional costs? Yes. Does the cost of Envision more or less than a conservative project? Yeah. Kind of was fine. It was a good thing to do. All right. What would you do differently? Again, as I've been mentioning, the upfront planning. Look at it early engagement, integrating that into the project. Really, this is all starting the process early. Okay, so a couple of tools available from ISI now. They have an Envision supplier directory now. So if someone is looking to have a sustainable project, is looking for a sustainable contractor, a sustainable manufacturer for their resources on the project, there's a supplier directory available now on the Envision website. And the other thing kind of related to that is a sustainable infrastructure, procuring sustainable infrastructure services. One of the credits is sustainable procurement. This guide is very helpful in really providing a template on how to achieve that for your project. So most of this has been a challenge on many of the projects I've worked on, is that they don't have a sustainable procurement process or a green procurement process established. They want to have one, but they don't have one established, so they don't get the credit for it. But this is a good tool to be able to get to that point. So again, that's available on the ISI website. Just the version 4 that I was talking about, they're aiming to release version 4 Envision in 2028. So they're working on it. I was involved in a data gathering for it and just looking for some of the credits that need improvement. So they're looking to have a new version 4 in 2028. So that's like 10 years after version 3. So that's pretty good. And that is it. I did have one more slide here, just about ISI and their annual conference, especially if you have a membership. It's a free conference in the fall. So I know the spring maybe some of you are graduating, but if you go to ISI, they have this free conference. You learn a lot more about Envision if you're interested in it. But what I particularly wanted to point out is if you guys have, if there's anybody that has a poster session that they might want to prepare or submit on a project. I don't know if anyone's seen your project is to do an Envision rating or anything like that. You might want to consider it for submitting an abstract for a poster. But registration's should be opening tomorrow or sometime in the next couple of weeks, but there's a due date that's coming up for that. So, and that is it. So I hope I finished and got through everything in a reasonable amount of time. I'm
Yeah,
happy to
absolutely.
open it up
Right on
to
time.
any questions anybody has.
Yeah, we have. Thanks, Jim. Like, first of all, like it was a terrific presentation. So much information, very, very comprehensive.